My name is Althea Haldane. I was 48 years old, and the cruelest thing my husband ever said about me was delivered through a microphone in front of our family, our employees, and nearly every person whose respect I had spent 20 years earning. It happened on Thursday, June 6th, during the anniversary reception for Haldane Millwork. The showroom had been cleared of display cabinets and sample islands. White tablecloths covered the workbenches, strings of warm bulbs hung from the rafters, and the smell of walnuts still lived beneath the catered food. Burke had insisted on making a speech. I stood near the cutting room doors with a glass of sparkling water, expecting him to thank the crew. I had prepared the payroll figures for his remarks and placed them beside the microphone that afternoon. Instead, he called his mother and sister to stand beside him. Cecily wore cream silk and the satisfied expression she saved for occasions she considered important. Greer had arrived from Atlanta that morning, though Burke had told me she was too busy to attend. Burke tapped the microphone. 20 years, he said. 20 years since I built this company from nothing. The employees applauded. I did too, because I had not yet understood the arrangement on that stage. Then Burke looked directly at me. And tonight seems like the right time to announce another change. Althea and I are getting divorced. The applause died so quickly that I heard ice settle in someone's glass. He had never asked me for a divorce. We had not discussed separation. That morning he had kissed my cheek before leaving for the showroom. I thought he might be making some vicious joke. Then a woman stepped from behind the catering station. Her name was Whitney Vale, and I recognized her as the commercial real estate consultant Burke had supposedly been meeting for months. Burke held out his hand to her. Cecily smiled before Whitney even reached the stage. That was how I learned the announcement had not surprised everyone. Burke looked pleased by my silence. He had always mistaken quietness for surrender. "You won't get a dime," he said, and laughed into the microphone. "The company is mine. The accounts are mine. Even the house came from my work." A few people lowered their eyes. Others stared at me with the helpless fascination people reserve for public accidents. Greer leaned toward the microphone. "Althea handled some paperwork," she said. "Let's not turn that into a founding myth." That hurt almost as much as Burke's announcement. Greer had once slept in our guest room for 6 months after her own marriage collapsed. I had paid her attorney's retainer from my personal account and never mentioned it again. Cecily did not need a microphone. "My son built every inch of this," she called. "She should leave with what she brought." I had brought far more than Cecily knew. Before I tell you why I stayed seated instead of defending myself, please subscribe, because the quietest person in a family often knows where every truth has been buried. Burke expected tears or fury. Either one would have helped him. He had invited employees, clients, and relatives because he wanted witnesses to an unstable wife. I gave him none. I set my glass on a table and asked, "Have you filed?" He blinked. "My attorney will do it tomorrow." So tonight was theater. His smile tightened, though it remained visible to everyone. It was honesty. "No," I said. "Honesty has records." I walked to the small office beside the showroom. My handbag was beneath the desk, exactly where I had placed it when I arrived. Inside it were my phone, my wallet, and the silver key to our home. I did not touch the locked cabinet behind the desk. Burke had a key to it, and so did I. The cabinet contained ordinary vendor contracts, not the thing I was thinking about. When I returned, Cecily was telling 2 suppliers that I had been unhappy for years. She knew this, apparently, though she had never asked. Rufus Bell, our shop foreman, met me near the exit. He had worked with us since the first rented warehouse and knew which invoices I had postponed paying so his crew could receive wages. "Do you need someone to drive you?" he asked. "I'm all right." He looked toward the stage, where Burke had resumed his anniversary speech with Whitney standing beside him. "No," Rufus said. "You're composed. That isn't the same thing." I thanked him and left in my own car. At home, I discovered that Burke had already packed. His suits were gone from the closet. So were his shaving things and the framed photograph of his father that had stood on his dresser. He had planned his exit carefully. On the kitchen counter, he had left an envelope containing a business card for his divorce attorney, Everett Sloan. Beneath the card was a typed note saying Burke would continue paying household utilities during the transition. The wording bothered me more than the insult. Burke did not write like that. An attorney did. I photographed the envelope where it lay, then placed both the note and the card in the second drawer beside the refrigerator. I did not take them upstairs or hide them. I wanted to remember exactly where they were. At 9:12 that night, my phone notified me that the password to our joint banking profile had changed. Burke had not only prepared a speech, he had prepared a siege. The next morning, I drove to the office of Lenora Quill, an attorney I had known for 14 years. Lenora did not practice divorce law. She handled corporate agreements, estates, and the quiet disasters people caused by signing papers they had not read. Her office occupied the second floor of a converted brick schoolhouse. When I entered, she was already standing beside the conference table. "I saw a video," she said. Of course, there had been a video. One of the younger installers had posted Burke's speech before midnight, and it had spread through local business circles. "He thinks everything belongs to him," I said. Lenora studied my face. Does he believe that, or does he need everyone else to believe it? That was the first useful question anyone had asked. I told her about the changed banking password. I showed her the photographed note and Everett's card. Then I told her Whitney had appeared on stage. Lenora wrote the name down. "Do not return to the company alone," she said. "Do not remove a single record. Do not forward yourself one email that wasn't already yours." I know. You know bookkeeping. Divorce turns ordinary behavior into exhibits. She opened a lower file drawer and removed a narrow gray folder. My name was handwritten on the tab, followed by the year 2013. The folder stayed in her hands. "Burke remembers the agreement," she said. "He remembers signing papers when the company was failing. That is not the same thing." In 2013, Haldane Millwork had been 3 weeks from missing payroll. A hotel developer had declared bankruptcy while owing us for an entire floor of custom cabinetry. Our lender reduced our credit line, suppliers shortened their terms, and Burke wanted to mortgage our house. That same spring, my aunt had died and left me an inheritance held entirely in my name. I had agreed to invest part of it in the company under one condition. The investment had to remain my separate property. Lenora drafted a stock purchase and marital property agreement. Burke received independent counsel from another attorney. After financial disclosures, waiting periods, and separate meetings, I purchased 72% of the voting shares. Burke retained the rest. He continued as company president because he was gifted with clients and design. I became chief financial officer because I could keep a promise from colliding with a bank balance. We stopped discussing percentages once the company recovered. Success had softened Burke's memory. Lenora laid the gray folder flat, but she still did not open it. "The original agreement is in secure storage," she said. "This is the correspondence file. I won't release anything until a family law attorney is involved." "Does he have a copy?" "He received one through his counsel." "Then why is he so certain?" Lenora looked at Burke's attorney's card on my phone. Because certainty is sometimes strategy. She referred me to a divorce lawyer in the same building. Before I left, Lenora returned the gray folder to the drawer and locked it. The key went back into the pocket of her jacket. I watched because, after Burke's speech, the location of every important object had begun to matter. On Monday morning, Silas Fick from Piedmont Community Bank called me. Silas had managed the company's commercial accounts for 8 years. He never called without arranging it first, so I answered before the second ring. "Althea, I need to verify an authorization." "For what?" "A draw against the equipment line." I sat down at the dining table. "How much?" $480,000. That was the only exact figure Silas gave me, and it was enough. I did not authorize it. We received board minutes naming Burke as sole voting shareholder. That is false. Silas became very careful. The submission also removes you as chief financial officer. Who submitted it? Burke delivered the documents with Greer Haldane. Now I understood why Greer had traveled from Atlanta. Silas explained that the requested funds were meant to purchase management services from a limited liability company Greer had formed. Because our operating agreement required majority approval for secured borrowing, the bank had stopped the transaction and contacted me. "I need your objection in writing," he said. I sent it while he remained on the line. Silas confirmed receipt, then froze new advances until the ownership issue could be reviewed. Burke called 6 minutes later. "What did you do?" I answered a bank question. "You blocked company funds." "I blocked an unauthorized transfer to your sister." His breathing changed, but his voice stayed controlled. "Those services were part of the restructuring." "What services?" "You haven't been involved in executive planning for months." That was clever. He was not denying the transfer. He was creating a history in which I had become irrelevant. "Send me the board minutes," I said. "You're no longer entitled to them." He ended the call. That afternoon, a process server delivered the divorce petition to my front door. Burke alleged that I had abandoned the marriage emotionally, interfered with business operations, and threatened the company's survival by freezing credit. He requested exclusive control of Haldane Millwork while the divorce was pending. His siege had acquired letterhead. I met my divorce attorney 2 days later. Her name was Daphne Pomeroy, and she had the unnerving habit of reading an entire page before making any expression at all. Lenora attended with the gray correspondence folder. This time, she placed it in front of Daphne and opened it. Inside were copies of the 2013 agreement, financial disclosures, letters between counsel, and a receipt showing that Burke's attorney had delivered his final copy by certified mail. The original agreement itself remained in secure storage. Daphne read every page. "This is strong," she said, "but he'll attack voluntariness, disclosure, or authenticity. If he cannot erase the agreement, he'll make it too expensive to enforce. He just tried to move money to Greer. That tells us he knows control matters." Lenora removed one cream-colored envelope from the back of the folder. It was sealed across the flap with an old law office stamp. "What is that?" I asked. "A certificate from Burke's independent counsel," Lenora said. "It was provided under the closing instructions. I have never opened it because there was never a dispute requiring it." Daphne examined the writing on the front. The certificate was to remain sealed unless Burke challenged the agreement by claiming he had not understood it or had signed under pressure. Burke did not know Lenora still possessed it. I had not known either. My pulse quickened, though nothing in the room moved. Daphne handed the sealed envelope back to Lenora. "Keep it where it is," she said. "If we open it too early, Everett will build around it." Lenora placed the envelope inside the gray folder, closed the folder, and took it back to her locked cabinet. For the first time since the showroom, I felt something other than shock. Not relief. Leverage. Burke answered the frozen credit line by locking me out of the company. On Wednesday, June 19th, I arrived at the showroom at 8 in the morning. My electronic keycard flashed red. Through the glass, I saw Rufus walking toward me from the finishing room. Burke intercepted him and opened the door himself. "You're on administrative leave," Burke said. "I'm an owner." "That's disputed." He carried a padded document envelope. Everett stood several feet behind him, which explained the formal tone. Burke held out his hand. "I need your access card and office key." Daphne had warned me this could happen. Refusing would let Burke claim I had threatened operations. I removed the brass office key from my ring. Then I took the key card from my wallet. I placed both objects inside Burke's padded envelope, and he sealed it in front of me. Rufus watched the entire transfer. "You have company equipment at home," Burke said. "I have a laptop issued to me. Return it by 5. At 4 that afternoon, I delivered the laptop to Daphne's office without opening it. Her litigation assistant photographed the serial number, placed the computer in a tamper-evident bag, and arranged for a bonded courier to carry it to Everett. I kept the courier's receipt. Burke had expected me to make one careless move. I made none. Have you ever watched someone rewrite your contribution while you were still standing in the room and realized they had been practicing the new version for months? I began examining the old version. Because I had handled our personal finances, I still possessed lawful copies of tax returns, insurance statements, and annual reports. I brought them to Daphne exactly as they existed in my home files. We found that Burke had begun preparing more than a year earlier. Consulting payments had increased. Vehicles had been leased through a company associated with Whitney. Greer's new business had invoiced Haldane Millwork for strategic planning, though Greer worked in luxury event marketing and had no manufacturing experience. None of that changed ownership by itself. Then Everett sent us the document Burke intended to use. It arrived through formal disclosure on Tuesday, July 2nd, the morning of our temporary hearing. The document was titled Amendment to Stock Purchase and Marital Property Agreement. It claimed that in September 2019, after the business recovered, I had returned all voting shares to Burke in exchange for repayment of my investment. My signature appeared on the final page. So did Whitney's notary stamp. I stared at it in the courthouse conference room while Daphne watched me. I did not sign this. Are you certain? Yes. Do not answer from anger. Look at the date, location, and witnesses. The amendment claimed I had appeared before Whitney in Savannah on September 17, 2019. I remembered that week because I had given a presentation at a national bookkeeping conference in Chicago. Burke had complained about attending alone, then canceled at the last moment. My conference badge was probably gone. The airline had changed systems. 6 years had passed. And the signature looked very much like mine. Burke had not merely planned a divorce. He had manufactured the document that would leave me with nothing. In the courtroom, Everett presented the amendment as proof that Burke was the sole owner. He described the frozen credit line as an attack by a resentful spouse. Daphne objected, but a temporary hearing was not a full trial. The judge examined the notarized amendment and said its validity could not be decided that day. Until forensic review, Burke would remain company president and control daily operations. I was barred from entering the premises without written permission. For a moment, he had nearly won. The bank freeze stayed in place because Silas had an independent duty to verify collateral authority, but I remained outside the company I had saved. As we left, Cecily and Greer waited near the elevators. They had attended because Everett had told them the hearing concerned business control. Cecily looked at the temporary order in Burke's hand. I told you she had no claim, she said. I did not explain the temporary was not final. Burke walked past me, close enough to speak without raising his voice. You should accept the house sale and walk away. From what? My company. The elevator doors closed between us. Daphne did not offer reassurance in the parking garage. If the amendment stands, the old agreement may not matter, she said. We need to prove where you were, and we need to examine the original. I was in Chicago. Memory is not evidence. That sentence followed me home. I searched the hall closet, the filing cabinet, and the storage boxes in the spare room. I found conference programs, but not the one from 2019. My old laptop had failed 2 years earlier and had been recycled after its drive was professionally wiped. At midnight, I remembered Rufus. He had attended the same conference because we were considering new shop management software. The company had paid his registration. I did not call him. Contacting an employee while barred from the company could be portrayed as interference. Instead, I told Daphne. She issued a lawful request through Everett for travel records, expense reports, and company photographs from the conference. Burke's side responded that older records had been purged. Then Rufus contacted Daphne on his own. He had learned her name from the temporary order Burke posted beside the employee time clock. He still had the personal phone that he had used in 2019, stored in a kitchen drawer after replacing it. On that phone were photographs from Chicago. One showed me standing beside Rufus and a software representative beneath a conference banner. The embedded data placed the photograph in Chicago less than 40 minutes before Whitney claimed I had appeared before her in Savannah. The phone itself mattered, so Rufus did not email the image. He brought the device to Daphne's office, unlocked it in front of a digital examiner, and signed a receipt when the examiner took temporary custody. The evidence was preserved correctly. Burke responded with another explanation. Everett argued that Whitney had written the wrong date in her notary certificate, but that I had signed the amendment later. He also produced email messages in which I had discussed Burke taking back the reins. The phrase was mine. I had written it after Burke returned from shoulder surgery and resumed client meetings. It had nothing to do with ownership, but separated from context, it sounded damaging. Daphne requested the complete email chain. The messages before and after it showed that I was discussing sales presentations, not shares. Burke's argument weakened, but it did not disappear. At mediation in August, Everett placed a settlement offer in front of me. Burke would let me keep my retirement account and part of the house proceeds if I surrendered every claim to the company. Burke sat across the table, looking healthier than he had in years. Whitney was not allowed in the mediation room, but I knew she was waiting downstairs because I had seen her car enter the garage. Greer attended as the representative of her consulting company. She wore a navy suit and avoided my eyes. "You could end this today," Burke said. "You could too. I'm offering security. You are offering part of what is already mine." Everett intervened. "The temporary order recognizes Mr. Haldane's operational authority." "It does not recognize ownership," Daphne replied. Burke slid the pen toward me. "You are good with numbers, Althea. Don't confuse that with building something." I looked at the pen but did not touch it. "How would you have handled that choice? Accept a smaller certainty or risk everything against a husband who had prepared a false history?" I declined the offer. Burke countered within 48 hours. He told our largest commercial client that the ownership dispute might delay a major hotel installation. Then he blamed the uncertainty on me and urged the client to transfer the contract to a new company he planned to operate with Greer. Rufus learned about the plan during a production meeting. He did not secretly record it. He simply wrote a factual account afterward and sent it to his own attorney, who advised him to report the proposed transfer to the court-appointed financial monitor. The monitor contacted the client directly. That institution, not an argument between spouses, stopped the contract from leaving. The client agreed to remain only if the company maintained existing insurance, staffing, and bank controls. Burke could still operate the shop, but he could no longer hollow it out. His next move came through Whitney. She signed an affidavit swearing that I had appeared before her voluntarily and acknowledged the amendment. She said the date discrepancy resulted from clerical reconstruction after her original notary journal had been damaged by a plumbing leak. The affidavit almost repaired the hole in Burke's case. Then Silas called Daphne. The bank had archived a scan of the original 2013 closing package because the company's equipment line had once been secured by shares. Included in that archive was a restriction stating that no transfer of my voting interest would be recognized without written notice to the bank. No such notice had ever been received. That did not prove the 2019 amendment was forged, but it showed I had never acted as if it existed. For 6 years after the alleged transfer, I had signed annual lending certificates as majority shareholder. Burke had countersigned 3 of them. Daphne asked Silas how he knew. He sent certified copies through the bank's legal department. The originals remained in bank custody, and Silas later appeared for a deposition to authenticate them. Burke claimed he had signed without reading. It was becoming his favorite defense. In September, the court allowed a forensic examination of the amendment. Everett produced the paper original he said Burke had kept in a home safe. The examiner found impressions beneath my alleged signature. Someone had practiced the beginning of my last name on a sheet placed above it. That finding was persuasive, but not perfect. The examiner could not identify who had made the impressions. Then I noticed the staple holes. The amendment had been stapled twice. Beneath the current staple were 2 older punctures, spaced differently. I told Daphne, who asked the examiner to inspect the page order. The first 3 pages had matching age, toner, and wear. The signature page did not. It had been inserted later. Burke was no fool. He did not confess or panic. He changed direction. Everett stopped arguing that the amendment was flawless and began arguing that the 2013 agreement itself was unfair. According to Burke, I had used the company's financial crisis to force him into surrendering ownership under duress. That argument threatened the foundation beneath everything. If the court rejected the original agreement, ownership could be treated as a marital issue rather than my separate property. Years of litigation might follow. The company could fail before anyone won. Daphne finally said it was time to open the cream envelope. Lenora brought the gray folder to her conference room. She removed the sealed envelope and handed it directly to Daphne. The old stamp across the flap remained unbroken. Daphne photographed both sides. Then she passed it to me. "You should open it," she said. "You were the client protected by the closing condition." I slid a letter opener beneath the flap. Inside were 4 pages. The first was a certificate signed by Burke's independent attorney. It stated that Burke had received financial disclosures, understood that my inheritance was separate property, and knew the company could not continue without new capital. The second page recorded that Burke had rejected a loan and had personally proposed transferring voting control instead because a loan would burden the company with repayment. The third page contained a handwritten statement. Burke had written it himself during his private meeting. "I have chosen this structure because Althea is risking separate family money to preserve the business and its jobs. I understand she will own 72%, even if the company later becomes more valuable." His signature appeared beneath it. The final page was a receipt confirming that his attorney had given him copies and advised him not to sign unless he accepted the permanent consequences. Burke had not been pressured into the arrangement. He had designed its central term. Lenora explained how the certificate had come to her. Burke's attorney had delivered it in the sealed envelope on the closing date, as required by the written instructions both sides had approved. Lenora stored it first in her firm vault and later in the locked archive cabinet after the file was closed. The chain had never broken. Daphne returned the pages to the envelope but did not reseal it. She placed the opened envelope inside a clear exhibit sleeve, signed the custody label, and handed it back to Lenora for trial. That document changed the shape of the case. It did not end it. Burke dismissed Everett and hired a trial specialist. He argued that the handwritten statement expressed an intention, not enforceable consent. He challenged the bank's records and suggested Rufus had sided with me to protect his job. He also tried to settle privately. One evening in October, he came to the house without warning. He still co-owned it, so Daphne had told me not to bar him unless a safety issue arose. He stood in the kitchen where his attorney's card remained in the second drawer. I had not moved it. "Whitney and I are finished," he said. I had not asked. "She complicated things. She notarized a false document. You can't prove I knew that." His choice of words told me more than an apology would have. Burke walked to the window overlooking the backyard. "We could sell the company together." "Why?" "Because neither of us will have anything if this continues." "That wasn't what you said in June." He turned. I was angry. "You hired caterers." For the first time, he had no polished response. He offered to acknowledge my shares if I agreed not to pursue claims connected to Greer's invoices or the attempted contract transfer. I told him to send the proposal through counsel. He left without doing so. Trial began on Monday, October 21st, in a courtroom open to the public. Several employees attended during their lunch breaks. Cecily sat behind Burke. Greer arrived because her company's payments were part of the evidence. Silas came under subpoena, and Rufus attended only on the day he testified. Whitney entered through a side door with her own attorney. The courtroom did not resemble television. There were long stretches of figures, dates, and questions repeated in slightly different forms. Yet every quiet detail carried more weight than Burke's microphone speech. Silas explained the bank restrictions. Rufus authenticated his old phone and the Chicago photograph. The digital examiner confirmed its embedded location and time. The document specialist showed the mismatched staple holes and the practiced signature impressions. Whitney testified that she could not remember exactly when I had signed. Under questioning, she admitted Burke had drafted parts of her affidavit. Greer said her consulting invoices were legitimate, but she could not name one finished project her company had delivered. When asked why she had accompanied Burke to request the credit line draw, she said she had been there for family support. The judge asked whether family support usually required banking credentials. Greer had no answer. Burke testified last. He was composed and convincing. That was why he had built a successful company in the first place. He spoke about sleepless nights, difficult clients, and the craft he had learned from his father. Most of it was true. Then he said, "I had never considered myself an owner until the marriage failed." Daphne waited. "Mr. Haldane, did you have independent counsel in 2013? I had a lawyer review a financing package. Did you understand Mrs. Haldane was investing inherited funds? Generally. Did you propose the ownership percentage? No." That was the moment. Lenora sat behind us with the clear exhibit sleeve in a locked trial case. During the recess, she unlocked the case and handed the sleeve to Daphne. Daphne inspected the custody label, then passed it to me at counsel table so I could identify the handwriting. I pulled the document out. The sound of those 4 pages sliding from the sleeve was barely audible, but Burke saw them. His eyes moved first to the old letterhead, then to the paragraph written in his own hand. The confidence left his face. Daphne showed me the statement. "Do you recognize this handwriting?" "Yes, it is Burke's." "How?" "I handled his notes, estimates, and correspondence for 20 years. He also wrote my name in the first sentence." After I identified it, the clerk took the pages from me and marked them as an exhibit. They did not return to my hands. Daphne approached Burke with a courtroom copy. "Did you write this?" He looked toward his attorney. The judge instructed him to answer. "Yes." "Then your testimony that you did not propose the ownership percentage was false." "I didn't remember." "Did you understand the transfer was permanent if the company became more valuable?" Burke read his own sentence again. "Yes." Cecily stared at the back of her son's head. Greer lowered her gaze to the floor. "The institution did what our family never had. It required an answer." The judge's ruling came the following Friday. The 2013 agreement was valid and enforceable. My shares remained separate property. The purported 2019 amendment was rejected because the notarization was unreliable, the signature page had been substituted, and the parties' later conduct contradicted it. The judge referred the suspected falsification to the district attorney without deciding criminal guilt in the divorce case. Burke was removed from unilateral control of Haldane Millwork. A neutral manager would supervise operations until the remaining ownership issues were resolved. Greer's unpaid invoices were disallowed, and the consulting payments already made were charged against Burke's share of the marital estate. The house would be sold because neither of us wanted to buy out the other. My retirement account remained mine under the agreement. Burke retained the lawful value of his minority interest, reduced by the losses caused through his attempted transfers. He did not get nothing. Neither did I. I got what belonged to me. Outside the courtroom, reporters were not waiting. We were not famous. There were only employees, relatives, lawyers, and people conducting their own painful business in nearby rooms. That made it more honest. Cecily passed me near the security station. "I hope you're proud," she said. "I'm tired." She seemed disappointed that I would not give her another scene. Greer left with her attorney. Whitney departed separately from Burke. Everett had not returned after being replaced, and I never saw him again. Rufus waited near the courthouse doors because the neutral manager had asked him to bring me to the shop. The bank had restored limited operating authority after receiving the ruling through its legal department. At the showroom, a locksmith finished changing the exterior locks under the manager's supervision. The locksmith gave the new brass keys to the manager, who checked the court authorization and handed one directly to me. Rufus stood where he had watched Burke take my old key months earlier. "Welcome back," he said. I unlocked the door. No one applauded. I was grateful for that. The employees had gathered near the finishing room, uncertain whether they were expected to choose sides. I told them they did not owe me loyalty for surviving my marriage. They owed the company honest work, and the company owed them honest wages. Then I walked into my old office. The locked cabinet had been inventoried. Nothing important was missing, because the important, original, had never been there. Burke's name remained on the showroom wall while the business valuation and minority buyout were completed. I did not tear it down in anger. Haldane was also my legal name, and the company's history included both of us. By early winter, the neutral manager asked whether I wanted to serve as president. I said no. I had watched what happened when one person confused a title with ownership. I returned as chief financial officer and promoted Rufus to chief operating officer. A sales director took over the client work Burke had once handled. The arrangement was less glamorous than a founder's speech. It worked better. Burke moved into a condominium across town. I learned this from a holiday card mistakenly mailed to the house, not from searching for him. His name appeared alone on the return address. Cecily continued telling relatives that I had stolen the company through legal tricks. One of those relatives repeated it to me at a grocery store, then stopped when I asked whether Cecily had mentioned Burke's handwritten statement. Apparently, she had not. Greer closed her consulting company before New Year's. Rufus heard she had returned to event marketing in Atlanta. I did not ask for more. Whitney's notary commission was suspended while the state investigated her journal and affidavit. I saw her once in February at a coffee shop. She noticed me, collected her drink, and left through the opposite door. There was no satisfaction in it, only distance. The house sold in March. On the final morning, I walked through the empty rooms with Inez Crowther, my neighbor of 11 years. She had watered my plants during the trial and never once asked for courtroom gossip. The kitchen sounded larger without furniture. I opened the second drawer beside the refrigerator. Burke's attorney's card and typed note were still inside, exactly where I had placed them on the night of the reception. Inez held a paper bag while I dropped the note into it. "You kept that all this time?" she asked. I needed to know where the story started. And now? Now it's just paper. We carried the bag outside. I handed the house keys directly to the closing agent, who had come for the final walkthrough. Then I climbed into my car with nothing from the house except 2 boxes, a suitcase, and the silver key that now opened my small rented bungalow. Months later, Haldane Millwork held another reception in the showroom. There was no stage. We placed food on the old workbenches and left the cutting room doors open so the evening air could move through the building. Rufus brought his wife. Silas stopped by after the bank closed. Lenora arrived late and stood quietly near a walnut display. I thanked the employees without claiming I had built everything alone. When the room emptied, I found the microphone Burke had used lying inside a storage cabinet. Its battery had corroded, and the anniversary ribbon was still tied around the handle. I removed the ribbon and left the microphone where it was. Then I locked the showroom with the key that had been handed back to me under lawful authority. Through the glass, the company name glowed above the floor we had all built. This time, I did not need to explain whose work had kept the lights on. Goodbye for now, and join me for the next story.